Hey everybody, I am Dr. Jason Bradley, the founder and director of Epic Functional Medicine Center in Iowa City, Iowa. And I am here for the November episode of Tea with Dee. As you guys know, last month we launched a new project that my mom Dee and I are working on. And the general thrust of it is that my mom has, and of course I'm biased, but has years of wisdom. This lady's been through a lot and a lot of changing times, and has enough years under her belt and wisdom under her belt to share some things with us. This month in November, I thought what we would talk about is food, how food has changed over the last number of decades. I'll let my mom tell you how many decades, but the last number of decades that she's been around. It's been a radical shift. I've had a good time chatting with her myself, and I thought that you guys might want to hear about that. So again, this is my mom, Dee. And I'm going to turn it right over to her. So, Mom, tell us
Yes,
about how food has changed over time.
food has changed tremendously. When I was young and I lived on the farm, we grew everything that we ate. How did we keep it? We canned and we canned and we canned. We even had a big old potato bin down in the basement that stored our potatoes in, and we'd go down and get our potatoes out of that during the fall and the winter when we were really hungry and needed our potatoes. We also had our own milk from the cows. We had to milk our cows to get the cream and the milk, and we separated that in a separator. We also raised our own chickens. We had our own eggs. We even made our own cheese from our milk. And I don't believe there's a lot of people that know exactly how hard it was back in those days. But at the time when I was growing up, I was used to that, so it wasn't hard. But now it would be hard. I would think, my goodness, I don't know how I ever did it.
But you did it.
But I did do it.
And your family did it. And everybody did
and
it.
my family did it. My brothers did it. We all did it. And here we are today.
And here we are. Hey, before we go further, because I want to chat with you guys. I know my mom said, back in the day, here's Arthur, by the way. Our little cockapoo Arthur decided to join us, and he just likes sitting on my mom's lap. Before we go any further, I want to talk about food today and how things change from the farm, and really have my mom talk a little bit about as she got into adulthood and that shift of raising a family, which would be me, and then we'll talk about a third piece, which is the kids are gone and we're older now, and we'll give her a chance to talk about that because things have changed over all those decades. But I did want to ask you about something because every time I talk to my mom, I hear something new, and I heard something new today, and I'm interested about it. So we got milk.
Yes, we have
From a cow.
From a cow.
Okay, now you separated it, the cream,
And
and you made butter and the cheese and the whole thing.
Yes.
Did you guys process that milk or did you just have it raw?
We had raw milk. We had raw milk.
We already knew that, right?
I didn't even know what processed milk was. We get it in a
Right.
town because we never bought any store milk.
Right.
And when my husband and I got married, my mother would bring me milk from my cows, and that was sure good.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I haven't even spoke to my mom about this before. But you guys know that there's this argument that milk is bad for us, milk is bad for us, milk is bad for us. I've said that to some of you guys. I mean, I understand that. But we got to remember that my mom's talking about raw milk. And when we start to compare things like, I'll science this up a little bit, and my mom's probably going to be bored for half a second. But when we talk about the protein structures that are in milk, when we do what's called pasteurization, meaning that we heat it up, we actually denature or break down those proteins, and they become foreign proteins. What that means is humans over the last number of years, thousands of years, have grown up synergistically, symbiotically with dairy being available, whether it's cow dairy, sheep dairy, goat dairy, or what other kind of dairy that we have. But it's only recent that we're pasteurizing, right? And the idea is that milk is contaminated. Raw milk will make you sick. There's bacteria. There's that. But did anybody get sick from milk?
No one at my place ever got
Did you,
sick
in
from
your
milk.
entire childhood, do you remember any of your friends, any of their families getting sick from raw milk?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. And nobody. We all had the milk. I know my neighbors too. They had cows.
Yeah. And so this whole idea that raw milk is bad for you, I just want you guys to understand that I don't know that that's totally true, right? And if we start looking at the protein structures, it looks like the raw milk protein and the raw milk fats work better in the human system than all this denatured, broken down stuff that our immune systems then recognize as foreign particles, and we'll create an inflammatory immunological response. Sorry about that. My daughter was checking in. She's on her way to Croatia to do some volunteerism with a family that needs some help, and she's on her year of volunteerism. And I'm proud of her, but she was just checking in. I'll call her in a minute. We have a whole family here. We have my daughter there. We've got Arthur here, my mom and me, and my other daughter's in the other room taking a nap, and it's all family affair. But what I was saying was that the proteins are different, and those different proteins, those denatured, man-manipulated proteins, are probably inherently related to the problems that people have with milk, modern milk. And like my mom said, it's awfully hard to go get raw milk these days. I mean, I don't even know if you can get it. I mean, it's illegal in some states for some reason. But even if you could, it'd be difficult. And you certainly cannot go down to the grocery store and buy raw milk. It's literally illegal in almost every state. Again, because of some belief that people got sick. But these people didn't get sick, right? So there's something else going on. At any rate, I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know she was going to bring that up. So that's cool. That's awesome. I learned something. So we'll fast forward a little bit. You get married. Your mom's bringing your milk. You've got some kids now, right? A few kids.
Right.
You made your first $3 or $4 million. I'm kidding.
Right.
Still
looking for it.
Yeah. We're gonna find it someday, right?
Right.
It's all right. We left it laying around the house somewhere. Yeah, we'll find it. But you're working. My folks are from a 2-income household. So they've both been working factory jobs, reception jobs. My mom actually volunteered when she retired to help set up the Healthy and Well Kids in Iowa program, and really got that going with the state of Iowa, making sure that every single child, and I think now pregnant female, right, can get health insurance. So I mean, lady retired at 65, and I think worked more hours for the next 10 years getting that thing going.
And less money.
No money. I think you lost money. I actually paid for photocopies herself.
I did a lot of stuff.
But anyway, she's done a lot of work. But in that middle area, so you have some kids.
Right.
What happened with food then?
Well, food then, we started going to the grocery store, and you could buy food in a can. So we didn't, but at the same time, we still had our garden.
Right.
We still canned, we still did that, but a lot of stuff came in cans at the store. And that was it saved your time. You didn't get as tired. Oh, just go to the store and bring home something, throw it on and eat it.
Right.
So you didn't have to cook all that. It was already done for you. Right. But it wasn't good food. It was mushy. It had a lot of grease, salt in it. No, who knows what was in it? But we ate it.
Well, we didn't know.
We ate it because we were hungry. Yeah, until we found out there were some things we shouldn't be eating.
Right, and I was just going to say, just to clarify that. So when I was growing up, and I'm not a spring chicken, but I'd say I'm in the modern age. Right out here in our backyard, my folks have not I wouldn't say land, but they have a house and a yard. A large part of that backyard, I'd say half of it, was taken up with a garden. And we grew, my entire childhood. I think I spent more time, picking beans and peas and what do we have? Onions. Literally, we grew everything. I actually have a slightly different memory here because my memory was, and then we also had a garden plot or what you call it, farm plot? A farm plot outside of town for a number of years until we kind of outgrew that. My brother and my sisters moved out, and we didn't need that big of a garden anymore, and so we just kind of kept the one in the backyard. But that was my entire childhood. I grew up canning food. I grew up eating food that we grew at the house that we didn't process. That all we did was put it in a jar, and I don't know, it was probably put water in or what you do, but and then we didn't have Instant Pots back then. We had those very dangerous iron pots that you'd put the mason jars in and clamp them down and to screw the whole thing on so it didn't explode. No pressure valve. It was, and nothing bad ever happened.
No, we didn't have. We did all
but that's how I grew up. I grew up on whole foods for the most part, and like my mom was saying, as course as I aged, that became different. When I say I grew up on a whole foods diet, I didn't realize how blessed I was. Now, granted, I wouldn't recommend that anybody eats bread. I know you guys know that I'm pretty anti-grains and et cetera. But if we had bread at my house, this lady made it.
Yes, we did. We made our
from
own
scratch. Everything was made from scratch.
That's right.
Now, granted, again, I think we know now some choices that we could have made differently and maybe use this flour and not this flour and, this milk and not that milk and all that stuff, right? But the point that I'm making is even in my my growing up in my generation, I grew up on a whole foods diet. And I actually think that's why I'm half as healthy as I am. And I mean, again, I won't say this lady's age, but she's got a few years on her, and I don't think she looks her age at all. I bet that literally, if I told you her age, I bet you'd get 20, think she was 20 years younger, right? She looks great. And I think that part of that is those decades of eating whole foods. Mm-hmm. So now the kids are out of the house. Mm-hmm. The garden's done. We're done with the garden because it got hard.
We can't do it anymore.
Yeah, the body, people's bodies change, and
right. And one person can't do a garden anymore.
Right, and one person can't do a garden anymore, as my mom said. As you guys know, my dad is a survivor of brain cancer, terminal brain cancer. Total win there. Cancer-free now for 6 years plus. I mean, he's doing great, but it did take his toll on his body, and he can't get out there and work that garden. So now my mom has to figure out over the last, 5-10 years, how to live without a garden, how to live without canned food. So what do you do?
Well, you get fresh,
I mean, I already know.
We get fresh, we go at the market, we get fresh fruit and fresh vegetables, and we cook our own. And you want to cook a little bit more so you'll have enough for another meal. Mm-hmm. Don't just do one meal. You want to make at least 2 meals out of it. Yes, we do that.
And we do that a lot too, where we make a little bit extra.
Right.
And then we make sure that that's probably our lunch the next day, or dinner the next day, or the next day or so. But yeah.
And a lot of times when you get older, then you have to watch what you eat. Because one time I had a terrible pain in my tummy. Terrible pain. And I went to see someone, and I had to go back to the medical doctor. And I have diverticulitis. And diverticulitis, you can't eat any nuts. Watch what you eat. No, nothing with seeds, nothing at all. You can't even eat the corn, the fresh corn. You can't eat corn anymore. So you had to change your diet completely. So I changed my diet. Of course, my husband did too, because he had to eat what I ate.
Because she's making the food, right?
You're right.
So I just want to say that again. So my mom brought up some points again. I actually knew she was going to talk about diverticulitis. We don't plan these things, but we had just kind of talked about this little bit of this piece. So diverticulitis, for you guys, just to clarify, in our colon, we have these little folds. So instead of being a smooth tube, we have these folds in there, these little pockets, if you will, that are called diverticula, or just folds. They're just folds in the tissue, kind of like the way my sweater folds here, right? So those are little pockets in there. And what happens is little food particles that are not digested well get stuck down in those folds, and then the body creates an inflammatory response or an immune response that can be very painful. Very, very, very painful. And sometimes they have to do surgery to get those things out. I mean, they can be pretty bad. Right. And again, I know this about my mom. So my mom doesn't eat that stuff. I mean, she knows better. And, if we're going to ever bring some food down, we're very careful about not putting X, Y, and Z in it that could flare up the diverticulitis. And you haven't had an episode forever.
Oh, I haven't, because I watch.
Right, because she watches what she does. But here's the thing. If you heard the words she said, you guys know that on my Epic 5 diet program that I've developed for you guys, a lot of those foods she mentioned are off that diet, right? So she talked about certain nuts, she talked about corn, she talked about these other pieces, right? Those are, I'll give you an example, tomato seeds, right?
You can't eat a
right?
tomato.
But I want you guys to hear what she's saying. It's lectins. I want you guys to understand what I'm saying. My mom doesn't know this part, but she's talking about all of the foods that she mentioned are high in lectins. Lectins, as you guys know, are a protein, and if you don't know, I'll share it. They're a protein that are noxious, inflammatory, destructive to the body. Lectins are actually poisons made from plants. This is so interesting. I have a background in anthropology as well, so I love it whenever I get to talk about this kind of stuff. But plants create poisons called lectins, and the reason they create those poisons are so that animals don't come and eat all the plants, because otherwise the deer and the rodents and everything, wild dogs, if they eat that stuff, would be eating all of these plants. So over, tens of hundreds of thousands of years, the plants that we have today produce lectins, and they say, don't eat me. And that's why animals know to avoid certain plants and why some can eat others, because the animals have also adapted to be able to eat certain lectins and need to avoid other lectins. Now, humans are not exempt from that, right? We can handle some lectins. Every plant has lectins in it. Something like broccoli has lectins in it. They're just not the lectins that are harmful to us as humans. On the flip side, let me tell you about the most famous lectin that you've all heard of. Do you know what it is?
I don't.
It's gluten.
Gluten, yes.
Now, you've heard of gluten before.
Oh, yes, yes.
So
yes.
everyone's like gluten-free, gluten-free, gluten-free. Listen, yes, gluten is a problem with a lot of people, but really, again, it's not just gluten. Gluten is just one of thousands of lectins, and those lectins are found mostly in things like grains, including corn, right? Seeds from nightshade family, like tomatoes. I know you guys know this, certain nuts, right? And if we look at that list that my mom avoids, no one's ever told her this, but it's a list of lectins. And isn't that interesting that as long as she avoids lectins, is what I'm understanding, your diverticulitis is fine.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
So again, no prednisone, no steroids, no drugs, just don't eat lectins, right?
Don't eat 'em.
So again, I mentioned this at the last Tea with Dee in October. It's kind of cool that by accident you raised me this way with no idea that I was going to be a food doctor. And then I see now that my upbringing really influenced the way I practice, the way I care for my patients, the coursework that I've created for you guys, all of that stuff. I mean, it's pretty fun. Anyway, I'm waxing poetic here, but this lady has had so much influence on me that, and then therefore you guys, right? So when you're mad at me, let me spin this way. When you're mad at me about taking lectins out of your diet, you can just blame my mom. That's ultimately what I'm trying to say here. It's my mom's fault. Everything, it's all my mom's fault.
You want to remember, your strawberries have seeds in them.
Yep.
Your raspberries. Your blackberries, don't eat them.
Yep. And they're high. They're especially don't eat them if you're high in any of the diverticulitis, right? If you have a tendency toward it,
because you don't know how it's going to affect you.
Yeah. And the unfortunate part of that is what my mom just mentioned: raspberries, blackberries, strawberries. Out of the fruits that are out there, those are the healthiest ones, right? And again, other fruits have tons of lectins, like apples. I don't know if apples have always had this many lectins. We might have developed those and hybrid those. If we go to the Middle East and look at like the original apples, from Middle East, they don't look anything like we have in America. They're tiny little tart. They're not sweet by any means. I don't think you'd ever want to just pick one up and eat it. Then here in America, we've got Red Delicious. And we GMO this and hybrid this. And again, that's a whole other conversation that my mom and I will have sometime. And in fact, I had some other topics I want to talk about, but I think we did a good job. You want to say?
I hope we did.
We did great. You did great.
He said I did great. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in.
Right.
We'll be back in December with another Tea with Dee. I don't know what our topic will be. Maybe the leftover topics I was going to chat about today, which was really my mom's opinion on if the way food is prepared and has changed is related to chronic disease states. We chatted about that a little bit. Short story of that was she said people weren't as sick when she was growing up as they are now. Yeah. And of course, we think it's due to food. But anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Tea with Dee for November. And next month, we'll be back with this lady and probably this dog. And who knows what else is going to happen. Have a great rest of the day. And I'm glad you tuned in. Thank you.
Thank you.